The Nuggets add a number of new staff additions. Plus, will Jamal Murray debut in front of the Nuggets crowd or return to Nuggets crowd at home or on the road? Mini show starts now.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us part of your day and your week. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can catch a live version of the show. We have today for you, I'm going to do a little mini show, because Mike Singer reported a number of additions to the Nuggets in terms of their front office. We'll talk about what the impacts of those are, particularly the addition of a shooting coach, a shooting consultant, and Mike Penberthy. We'll talk about him, what he can bring to the Nuggets, all that and more. In the third segment, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of something that was reported this morning by, discussed by Vic Lombardi. I want to get into that real quick, just as like a primer ahead of the schedule release. Today is a double release day. So if you're listening to this or you're watching live on YouTube with folks like Zamora and Dominique and Carlos and CJ and Jumpman Holla and Snail, then we're going to have another show later after the schedule is released. Adam and I will jump on and we'll talk about the marquee games. We'll talk about what the schedule looks like, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, all that and more. We'll do a lot of that today on the show. So I want to go ahead and get a smaller episode in here so that you guys would be able to... I just want to go ahead and talk about some of this stuff because we'll talk a lot about the schedule. We'll talk about, games are going to be starting. And so I wanted an opportunity to kind of talk about these other things before we get into all of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start here. So Mike Singer from the Denver Post, the preeminent beat writer for the Denver Nuggets, reported yesterday the Nuggets' new hires. He's got an article up on the Denver Post, which you can check out and subscribe to. Drew Nicholas, director of scouting, former college player, is joining, and pro player, actually. Drew Nicholas is joining as director of scouting. Chad Iskey returns after he was actually an assistant under George Karl. He's worked with the Wizards. He's worked with a number of other teams. And he returns as a pro scout. Jarrett Stevens is added as a pro scout. Jared Jeffries, who worked with the Nuggets front office a couple of years ago, he returns as a college scout. Todd Chechevich also returns comes on board as a college scout. The most interesting of these is that Mike Penberthy, former NBA player, joins as a pro scout. So that to me is like the big kind of takeaway, but let's talk a little bit about some of the losses as well. One of Tim Connelly's brothers has left the organization to join him in Minnesota, as has John Wallace, who was actually a pretty positive part of the Nuggets organization. Losing Wallace is another loss for the Nuggets. It's another Tim Connelly guy that goes and joins him over on the Minnesota Timberwolves. And so this is another thing to kind of keep in mind, that there will be kind of those ramifications. Wallace also, by the way, for those of you that were hoping for, I've kind of mentioned all the KD connections. Wallace was another guy from the Baltimore DMV area. And so that kind of changes things a little bit in terms of that conspiracy theory. Wallace, though, was really well liked, really well regarded, going to probably wind up being a very successful executive. He joins Tim Connelly in Minnesota. And so these additions are part of kind of the reshaping under Calvin Booth of, quote unquote, his guys. So there's all of these kinds of things to keep in mind when we look at the overall kind of context. Chad Iskey, I knew him a little bit when he worked under George here in Denver. Very well regarded around the league. Just a positive influence. Guy knows basketball, been around it forever. Chad is absolutely a class act. Jared Jeffries had a really, everyone spoke very highly of him when he was here with the Nuggets. Now, most of these are changes on the scouting side. So I'll be honest with you, most of these are not going to change anything for you. You won't have a lot of forward-facing contact with them. But it does also, showing all these additions to the scouting staff, I think definitely does reveal still an investment from both Calvin Booth and the organization into the scouting department, which is really important both on a pro and college level. You need a robust scouting department. The teams that don't have big scouting departments, they tend to struggle. You need a lot of detail. You need a lot of information. The best teams that I know in the league are the ones that consistently have a lot of options to Hurricane. You got to stop. To you need a lot of information to make the best decisions possible. And so having a wider scouting program, I think, very much helps with that. But like I said, the most interesting of these additions is Mike Penberthy. And we'll talk about why his joining the Nuggets is more than just a scout position. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I want to tell you, I have a message for you from the NHTSA. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads just to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us, making us part of your day and your first listen each and every day. We really appreciate you guys joining us. Again, this is a bonus episode where you'll have a full breakdown of the schedule when it comes out later today from me and Adam, but want to go ahead and tide you over with a little small one about the additions to the Nuggets scouting and front office staff. So let's talk a little bit about Mike Penberthy. Penberthy has been known around the league as a shooting coach for a number of years. He's worked with a number of organizations, obviously quality shooter in the NBA. Essentially, this is the first time I think the first time I can remember. No, I think Price came in for like a year with Malone. But in general, there hasn't been a lot of shooting consultants with the team. Having a shooting consultant on board, I will tell you this. There is not a consensus around the league on this. It's not like one side or the other. It's not like there's a consensus like you don't really need one. They're not going to do anything. And there's also definitely not a consensus that, oh, they're great. They do so much for you. Here's the measurable impacts. There's never really been kind of an agreement on it. And it does vary organization by organization. And a lot of that, I think, that has to do with the fact that oftentimes shooting consultants are brought in to work with guys outside of the rest of player development. So if player development's working with them and then they work with the shooting coach, it's not necessarily linked. And sometimes there can be internal politics that cause problems there. Additionally, the shooting consultants often they work on their own stuff and they work on their own side. And so they have their own business. I think having Penberthy actually come on as a scout and work in pro development, I think all of that really helps here in terms of like having him integrated into the organization. But having a voice that can actually help with shooting, I do think ultimately is a good thing. There are times when a team will want to rework a guy's shot, and that can cause short-term problems. The best indication of this I can mention is that Brandon Clark with the Grizzlies had a really good, solid rookie year shooting, and then they reworked his shot, and he was a disaster the year after, and there's a lot of concern he was going to fall completely out of the rotation. Well, that stabilized, and then last year started to really come back around, and Clark was phenomenal in the playoffs, and is one of the people that people were talking about for potentially a sixth man of the year. He won't win. He won't get enough shots. But in general, I think having the work done on shooting is pretty impressive. It's good to have kind of that repetition and to try and work on individual things as you work through it. This was a priority for Calvin Booth, that he wanted to get a shooting consultant in. Penberthy, again, has a lot of experience working with various teams. He's been doing this for quite a while, so he's very well regarded. I'll tell you that too, that like there's just always been a high level of, he's one of those guys that people have talked about consistently when working with teams. He worked with the Lakers. He worked with a lot of different people. So this actually, I think, is a pretty solid addition to the team. He is the most notable, I think, kind of addition to the squad. If we look at what's actually going to have an impact for the fans, it's going to be the addition of Mike Penberthy. I think that's probably the best way to put it, is that, there's really an advantage here to having a guy that can bring those kind of things to the table. So as we kind of look at this, there's a lot of questions in the comments about various things. I want to get to those. We're going to do kind of a mailbag segment in the third segment. We'll get to those as well as some comments about, Vic Lombardi, friend of mine, made some comments in the conversation with Mike Singer on Twitter. Want to go ahead and address those, and we'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I want to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. I put in an NBA win total bet this morning on the Sacramento Kings. That's right, taking the over on the Kings. What could possibly go wrong? BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. Live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us, making us part of your day and your first listen every day. Matt Moore with you on a special bonus mini episode here today, breaking down some of the Nuggets staffing changes from Mike Singer, as well as the impact of a shooting coach. And now we'll talk a little bit about some other things. So let's kind of start here. Vic Lombardi over on Twitter. Mike Singer said that he hasn't asked about the Nuggets opener. I haven't either, because that's not a thing that I've done. And he said that he would be surprised if the Nuggets didn't open at home, because he thinks the fans deserve to get the first glimpse of Jamal Murray at Ball Arena. It'd be short-sighted if they were to open on the road, is what Mike said. And Vic just responded, it will be on the road, which I'm going to tell you, Vic is a member of the Altitude staff on Air Talent, probably has a copy of the schedule. So this means that says that Jamal's going to have his first game be on the road. And that's just a shame. That really is. Now, maybe Vic doesn't know. Maybe Vic was just saying, like, this is how the league screws us. That's consistently possible. I do want to kind of mention it just because, one, Katie Winge shared a report from someone overseas in Australia that's covering Jamal's trip over there, and Jamal confirmed that his first action back will be in preseason. That'll be on the road too. Just going to go ahead and let you know, his first game back will be on the road. It will be probably in California. The Nuggets always basically sell their preseason games to one of the California teams. They get the gate. The Nuggets make a buck on it. They make more than they would make with a home preseason game. So I'm expecting the Nuggets to once again play in California somewhere versus one of the California teams. It's just what they've done every year that I've been here. So yeah, it's a bummer. You can't hold Jamal out, right? And maybe it's better. Maybe like get Jamal his first game back, get his wings under him, etc. in the first game if it's on the road, and then kind of go from there. Now, if we're wrong on this, which again, you're listening to this on Wednesday, I'm recording this on Wednesday morning. A couple hours from now, it could be wrong. I want to talk about it just because like we're here and people are talking about it in the comments. But that is a bummer, because the first game that Jamal is back is going to be an absolutely incredible atmosphere. I can't wait to see what Game Ops does for him. Like the intro video, they need to like do the rest of the starters, and then there needs to be like a separate video for Jamal. I guess an MPJ too. Like put them both in there, right? Just have him do that, and then introduce MPJ and then Jamal. But that's going to be really amazing. And if it really is on the road, that's a bummer. Some folks have asked about the game today, which features Luka versus Jokic in Serbia in one of the friendlies. It's the Serbia versus Slovenia match today. If you follow Locked On Nuggets on Twitter, if you have somewhere where you know how to stream that legally, I don't want to get us in trouble. If you have a way to stream that, please hit us up on Twitter at Locked On Nuggets, or hit me up at HB Basketball, and we'll share that. Otherwise, like, I haven't heard anywhere that's going to have access to it. I've seen some comments that are like, here's a site, make sure you have great ad blockers. I'm always concerned about those kind of sites, just personally. I worry about that for my own computer safety. But I do think that, there will be clips, there will be highlights, there'll be some action from it, even if it's not available for people to watch consistently throughout the game. There will be probably links shared, but I don't have any sort of like real access point for you. I also don't really know what to look for in these games, quite honestly. I don't know what to expect from the Serbian national team, especially after Jokic was benched last time. I just don't know what to expect. Follow Miroslav. That's my best advice for you. Miroslav can put everything into context. So that's, to me, is the best way that you can look at this. I do think it's notable, by the way, that Jamal is returning. He is going to be back in preseason. He's playing in pickup ball. We've seen those clips and everything. It's good that he should be fully good to go for that. We'll have more information probably that on Media Day. We'll ask Malone first off, kind of what's the plan for Jamal when he gets back. That to me is like a really important thing to kind of watch and keep in mind as well. We'll have a full schedule breakdown just for if you're listening to this and you haven't gotten to that episode yet, and if you're going to take a break before you catch that episode, because I don't know when Adam and I are going to get to record tonight. I will say the things to look for in the schedule are you want to look at the first through Christmas. Look at how many road games there are. Look at how many home games there are. Look at how many back-to-backs there are. Opponent strength of schedule can be a little wonky. Obviously, like if they play the Clippers like 3 times, yeah, that's tough. They play the Warriors like 3 times in the first 2 months. That's tough. In general, strength of schedule can vary quite a bit, and you don't know who's going to be in and who's out. I would look at the final number of games. You want teams very solidly that are going to be absolutely tanking. Spurs, Rockets. I don't know if the Magic are going to be tanking, but probably by that point, yeah. Maybe the Pistons. The Pistons might be pretty decent this year. You want the tanking teams in that last week of the season, or you want teams that you know are going to be so good, they're going to be resting guys. So if the Nuggets play the Warriors in the last week of the season, which I think is pretty likely, given they'll be like, ooh, it's a playoff rematch right before the playoffs, the Warriors are probably resting. The Nuggets might be resting, but if you're trying to make up ground in the standings, people always pay attention to the first week and nobody looks at the end of the schedule. That last, from March 30th through the end of the season, is when the first thing that I look at to get a sense for what the road to the playoffs is going to be in there. So that's going to wrap it up for Locked On Nuggets today. Like I said, short show. Just want to get a touch on those additions to the staff. Want to talk about the impact of a shooting coach, and want to get to a few of these schedule notes and the stuff that we talked about. We'll have full reaction to the schedule later today on Locked On Nuggets. Hope you guys have a great one. Adam and I'll be back later with another episode. If you're listening to this in the podcast form, just check your feed. By the time that you're hearing this, it will probably not, depending on when, it might not be up, but it'll be up very shortly. It'll be up by the end of the day on Wednesday, and we'll do it on YouTube, and we'll tweet it out, the live link as well. Hope you guys have a great day. Enjoy schedule day, and we'll talk to you guys again soon on Locked On Nuggets.